Probably everyone here is wearing a clothing item that has been sewn together by a sewing machine. While not everybody knows how to use one, it's undeniable that they're a very, very useful instrument in the textile industry. Many times when people get a rip in their clothes, they go straight to the trash bin and throw it away. But hopefully, after this speech, you'll rethink that. Today, I'm going to show you the benefits to society that the sewing machine has, the materials you need to thread a sewing machine, and exactly how to thread a sewing machine. Sewing has been around for thousands of years, but it wasn't until 1830 when some of the first sewing machines were used. They were used to create uniforms for the French army. While after a warehouse burnt down with the 80 machines inside used, it was discontinued for a little bit. But this practice still remains 200 years later, almost 200 years later. Now, this wasn't the only benefit to society that the sewing machine had. Before World War I, women were expected to be stay-at-home housewives, while men were out doing all of the work. Once the war started, though, and men were being deployed overseas, it left many open jobs, and women had to fill in. Women began to take over the ammunition, textile, and welding industries. Women saved the economy of the world during the war, and it's all thanks to the sewing machine. Now that we've gone over the history of the sewing machine, let's thread into how to thread, or the materials you need to thread your machine. First, you need a sewing machine. Sewing machines are pretty accessible nowadays, as they range from about $150, as beginner sewing machines range around $150 to $200. The one I have here is secondhand, so it's around, I didn't get it for $150, but it would be around that. Silverbobbin.com explains how as your sewing skills increase, the machines become more expensive. Next, you'll need thread. The most common thread used is 100% polyester, but you can also use a blend of polyester and carbon. You can get a spool of thread of about 200 yards for as cheap as $1. Next, you'll need bobbins. So a bobbin is what holds the second string underneath your machine that creates the chain stitch. Finally, you'll need a sewing needle. I can't bring sewing needles to school, so I don't have one here to show you, but this picture is what they look like. They're pretty universal, and there's really only a couple kinds, but they look very similar for every machine. Now that this is a video that shows you how the chain stitch works. The shuttle hook under the bobbin grabs the thread from the eye of the needle and brings it up and around the bobbin thread. Now that we've gone over the materials, let's sew into how to actually thread your sewing machine. First, you're going to start with your spool pin, but you're going to start by threading your bobbin. Joanne Fabrics has a great video on YouTube that I used to follow along. It's a pretty difficult step to master, so watching the video is a very great help. Next, you'll have your spool pin. You'll place your thread on the spool pin. Spool pins look different on every machine, but they serve the same purpose, to hold your thread. You're going to take your loose thread into the tension disc, and then down and up and into the thread take-up lever. These together create the tension for your string so it doesn't get tangled up inside the mechanics. If you don't see your thread take-up lever, turn the hand wheel towards yourself until it shows up. Next, you're going to take your string and you're going to put it in front into the little hook right above your needle. This guides the thread to the eye of the needle. Then finally, you're going to put the string into your needle. Now, the sewing machine needles are a little bit different than hand stitching needles because the eye has to be at the bottom by the sharp end. Now, you'll pull about 1 to 2 inches of string through the eye of the needle, and you are ready to start sewing your next fabulous project. So, sewing may not be everybody's cup of tea, but it is undeniable that it's a very important skill to know. Now, we've gone through the history and the step-by-step process of how to thread a sewing machine, which was a lot. So let's take a small recap. We've talked about the benefits to society the sewing machine had, the materials you need to thread a sewing machine, and exactly how to thread your sewing machine. Hopefully, thank you all, and hopefully after this speech, you now can reconsider throwing that shirt away that has a tear in it. Thank you.